Teď to si říš. Je to dobrý. A bavili jsi tam? Nebo už ne? Trošku.
And now let me very briefly introduce you the next conversation we'll have on how Stalin destroyed winemaking tradition with Matt and Terry Kibbe. Matt Kibbe is an economist by training, and president at Free the People, an educational foundation using video storytelling to turn on the next generation to the values of personal liberty and peaceful cooperation. Also co-founder and partner at Fight the Power Productions, a video strategic communication company. Kibbe is the host of Blaze TV, Kibbe on Liberty, a popular podcast that insists that you think for yourself. Terry Kibbe is co-founder and chief executive officer at Free the People, an educational foundation reaching young people with stories about liberty. Free the People engages upstream of politics using pop culture, video comedy, and art, multimedia narratives about the beautiful things that happen when people are free to create, disrupt, and cooperate. She is also co-founder and partner at Fight the Power Productions, a strategic communication firm focused on video production, social media, branding and distribution, and compelling storytelling. From 2009 to 2014, she served as chairwoman of the advisory board of the Rising Tide Foundation in Schaffhausen, Switzerland, and as an advisor to the Global Philanthropic Trust in the Cayman Islands. Let me welcome them on the stage and really thank them for being here.
We want to thank you all for coming out to hear us. We are so happy to be back at Students for Liberty. I think we were at the very first conference in Europe in Leuven, Brussels, and I think this is, sorry. And this, I think, is our 10th time back in the country of Georgia. We believe firmly in the philosopher Anthony Bourdain, who says, drink heavily with locals whenever possible. So we like to consider ourselves wine tourists. Some people travel to see art or culture, architecture, trains, but we have found that when you travel and you meet with the local wine producers, or if you're in Mexico, the mezcal producers, you get a much better sense for the country and the culture and the people. And that is so true here in the country of Georgia. 2 years ago, we were visiting here and we were at Zangari Winery. And we learned the story of how Stalin, feel free to boo every time we use his name, when he was in power, he basically tried to kill the beautiful wine culture that is so important to Georgia. Every family has a winery in their backyard. They believe it brings people together. They talk about family, they gather, they have these big dinners called supras, and they talk about family and freedom and liberty and the importance of all of that. And Stalin tried to kill it. He basically took all of the vineyards, plowed them under. There's like hundreds of different wine types, grape types, and replanted them with 2 big wines. One Saperavi, one, this is Cazzotelli. And they're great wines and they still make beautiful wines now, but what he did was he abused the wines. He abused the vines. He planted so many of them, he just kept forcing more and more grapes out of them, plowing more and more fertilizer on them, and ruining this beautiful culture, and making, pardon me, really shitty wines that not only really enjoyed, but it was all that they had. Luckily, Stalin came out of power, and amazing entrepreneurs came over and restarted this beautiful culture. We have spent the last week in Kibbe, Georgia, filming a documentary where we're talking about this fight and this struggle. And now Matt is going to talk about one of the guys that we met with.
So this project started like all good projects. We were drinking and hearing a story about Mehrab from Zangara. Terry mentioned this winery. And he sort of nonchalantly said that after the fall of the Soviet Union, he decided to repurchase the family's vineyards, his grandparents' vineyards, that Stalin had stolen from his family. And he took on this project, and he took it on as a business, he took it on as a tradition in his family, and he took it on as a way to restore Georgian culture and Georgian tradition and this very beautiful thing that is unique to Georgia. This particular vineyard is Papari Valley, one of the most beautiful wines made in Georgia. There's a mythology about Stalin, and supposedly these particular parcels of vineyards in Kakheti are the ones that Stalin said he liked the best. So if you wanted to be important in Soviet times, you would get your hands on this particular wine. I can't pronounce the subregions because my Georgian is non-existent. But the reality was, there was nothing different about these grapes or these parcels of land from any other wine that you would drink in Soviet times. It was mass-produced. As Terry said, it was shitty. It was sweet, and it was the same. Everything was the same. All of these ancient traditions had been replaced with an industrial, one-size-fits-all approach to winemaking. And as I was talking to Sandro from Papari Valley, he told a story that seemed like a good metaphor for our movie. He said, to make good wine, the vines need to struggle. This is true in France, this is true in Napa Valley, California, this is true in Spain. Anybody that makes world-class wines, the idea is not sameness. The idea is not to maximize production. The idea is to not to constantly overproduce and over-fertilize and overuse pesticides. The idea instead is to be natural and to let the vine struggle to produce the very best grapes. Most of the grapes don't make it. Sometimes the vines don't make it, but that process, that struggle, is what creates something so beautiful. Sounds a little bit like freedom, doesn't it? The process of working and struggling and creating and trying to figure out for yourself how to get past the challenges that we all face, that creates something beautiful. So that became the metaphor for our story, the struggle of the vines. We think that there's a way here to not just pick on Stalin, but to understand the beauty of tradition and innovation and doing the things that people do to create something beautiful. It only happens when people are free.
You want me to go to the next slide already? Here, have some wine. You talked about, sorry, we're running ahead of schedule, which never happens. We'll talk about this. So we can keep talking and talking about what we saw and the spirit that we have found here in Georgia amongst the winemakers and how they have come back and they've purchased the land back that Stalin stole from their grandparents, and how they're working to rediscover these ancient grapes by using modern technology, going into these old quervies and finding the remaining little bits of grapes and using technology to discover what they are and replanting and bringing back this beautiful, beautiful culture that you have in Georgia. But rather than us talk about it, we think that it's best if you hear it straight from one of our very good friends, Gia. Gia runs Chateau Marais outside of Tel Aviv, and he was one of the very first entrepreneurs to come back and plant wines, and his grapes and it's Viniferia is his winery. They're beautiful, but you can hear from him the struggles that he went through and the country of Georgia as well.
Yeah, mostly Soviet wine, what was the industrial wine of Soviet, or the Soviet, because it was not a business, first of all. It was nobody's wine. It was a Soviet wine. It was a socialist wine. Can you imagine what the socialists I never, I don't, also, I don't know, not only me, also, nobody knows the things or the countries or the business done by socialists. They destroy everything, not only the wine industry, also the life industry, everything. How they can produce the wine? How they didn't produce the people. The Soviet people, it was a Homo Sovieticus. They cannot produce the people, you know, with the mentality, with the mental, yeah. It was a very, I don't know, it was a very big illness what we had on ourselves. And my parents and my grandparents. That's why who was able, they escape, and he was not able, they was lost in this era. This was the big problem. It is not only the matter of the wine, it was a matter of the mentality. It was nothing in that time, no business, no culture, no, nothing. I don't know if you just hear or listen from the TV or you read from the newspapers or some in USA or in some other country. But here it was terrible because if you do the business, you are criminal. If you do something different, you are criminal. If you think something different, you are criminal. That's why the post-Soviet people are they already able to how to go through the rules, how to go evade the rules.
So why is Free the People making a documentary about wine? I mean, it might have to do just a little bit with the fact that we love Georgian wine. But we believe that to reach people, you need to tell a story, you need to talk about the culture, and reach people with their hearts. And then when you can, we weave a little bit into the story about Stalin and communism and why freedom is the most important value that anyone can have. And these winemakers, these vineyard owners that we met, embody that spirit. They embody freedom, and they know the struggles that they went through and their grandparents went through under communism, and they can tell the story so much better than we can.
There's a pattern in this project. So if some of you are old enough, you might remember about 5 years ago in Belgrade, I did a hands-on lecture about beer. Did anyone do that one? And it might seem that we just drink a lot, but there's always a metaphor in almost any cultural story about the explosion of microbeers in the United States, about the fact that the mezcal tradition, hundreds, if not thousands of years old in Mexico, was essentially an outgrowth of the protectionist policies of the Spanish invasion. Here in Kibbe, we see a story about the destruction of sameness, the brutality of central planning, the uncaring nature with which guys like Stalin said, you don't get to make the wine that your village has been making for thousands of years. You will drink what we say. You will do what we do. And Guy is talking about this in this video clip, and he goes on to talk about the poison of that mindset, where after a while, when you're not allowed, when you're prevented from doing things, you stop being able to think for yourself. You stop to be able to do for yourself. You stop being able to think critically about what Federico was talking about before, the ability to solve problems, the ability to challenge your own history and create beautiful things. I think that there is a powerful way to connect with people, but in the meantime, we must do more empirical research. I understand, some Austrian economists, they talk about a priori theory and all that, but our view is if you don't drink a lot, you're really not going to get the story right, so we must continue doing this.
Wrong one. So in Georgia, there is this great tradition of toasting after every meal or during every meal, and everyone gives a toast. And some of the toasts go on for a half hour or longer. So I'm going to do a little bit of that tradition. You can see here, we got into the spirit of the supra and wine here. And so I'm going to give a quick toast to freedom, and I'm going to attempt to say this in Georgian. Tavasutsputpleda? I think I just completely screwed that up. Anyway, to freedom and liberty. Gamotis.
That wasn't even close.
I know it wasn't close. Thank you all.